Hey, darling squirrels, I don't know if y'all gonna be able to stand me or not. I'm harking. And I took my pill this morning, but I guess it's time to take another one. The Zyrtec. It ain't been doing much today. Anyway, here we go. Let me go back. Hey, did y'all know? I found this movie. It's a Disney movie. The Old Curiosity Shop on YouTube. I started watching it last night, but then, of course, I went to sleep. Okay, and Quilp in the movie is not a dwarf. He don't look that... I mean, he don't look great, but he don't look as bad as I envisioned this fella. His uneasiness arose from a misgiving that the old man had some secret store of money which he had not suspected, and the idea of its escaping his clutches overwhelmed him with mortification and self-reproach. In this frame of mind, it was some consolation to him to find that Richard Swiveller was, for different reasons, evidently irritated and disappointed by the same cause. It was plain, thought the dwarf, that he had come there on behalf of his friend to cajole or frighten the old man out of some small fraction of that wealth of which they supposed him to have an abundance. Therefore it was a relief to vex his heart with a picture of the riches the old man hoarded, and to expatiate on his cunning in removing himself even beyond the reach of importunity. "Well," said Dick, with a blank look, "I suppose it's of no use my staying here." "Not the least in the world," rejoined the dwarf. "You'll mention that I called, perhaps?" said Dick. Mr. Quilp nodded and said he certainly would, the very first time he saw them. "And say," added Mr. Swiveller, "say, sir, that I was wafted here upon the pinions of concord, that I came to remove with the rake of friendship the seeds of mutual violence and heart-burning, and to sow in their place the germs of social harmony. Will you please have the goodness to charge yourself with that commission, sir?" "Certainly," rejoined Quilp. "Will you be kind enough to add to it, sir," said Dick, producing a very small limp card, that is my address, and that I'm to be found at home every morning. 2 distinct knocks, sir, will produce the slavery at any time. My particular friends, sir, are accustomed to sneeze when the door is open, to give her to understand that they are my friends, and have no interested motives in asking if I'm at home. I beg your pardon, will you allow me to look at that card again?" "Oh, by all means," rejoined Quilp. "By a slight and not unnatural mistake, sir," said Dick, substituting another in its stead, "I had handed you the pass ticket of a select convivial circle called the Glorious Apollers, of which I have the honor to be perpetual grand. That is the proper document, sir. Good morning." Quilp bade him good day. The perpetual grand master of the Glorious Apollers, elevating his hat in honor of Mrs. Quilp, dropped it carelessly on the side of his head again and disappeared with a flourish. By this time certain vans had arrived for the conveyance of the goods, and divers strong men in caps were balancing chests of drawers and other trifles of that nature upon their heads, and performing muscular feats which heightened their complexions considerably. Not to be behindhand in the bustle, Mr. Quilp went to work with surprising vigor, hustling and driving the people out like an evil spirit, setting Mrs. Quilp upon all kinds of arduous and impractical tasks, carrying great weights up and down with no apparent effort, kicking the boy from the wharf whenever he could get near him, and inflicting with his loads a great many sly bumps and blows on the shoulders of Mr. Brass, as he stood upon the doorsteps to answer all the inquiries of curious neighbors, which was his department. His presence and example diffused such alacrity among the persons employed that, in a few hours, the house was emptied of everything but pieces of matting, empty porter pots, and scattered fragments of straw. Seated like an African chief on one of these pieces of matting, the dwarf was regaling himself in the parlor with bread and cheese and beer, when he observed, without appealing to do so, that a boy was prying in at the outer door. Assured that it was Kit, though he saw little more than his nose, Mr. Quilp held him by his name, whereupon Kit came in and demanded what he wanted. "Come here, you sir," said the dwarf. "Well, so your old master and young mistress have gone?" "Where?" rejoined Kit, looking round. "Do you mean to say you don't know where?" answered Quilp sharply. "Where have they gone, eh?" "I don't know," said Kit. "Come," retorted Quilp, "let's have no more of this. Do you mean to say that you don't know they went away by stealth as soon as it was light this morning?" "No," said the boy in evident surprise. "You don't know that?" cried Quilp. "Don't I know that you were hanging about the house the other night like a thief, eh? Weren't you told then?" "No," replied the boy. "You were not," said Quilp. "What were you told then? What were you talking about?" Kit, who knew no particular reason why he should keep the matter secret now, related the purpose for which he had come on that occasion, and the proposal he had made. "Oh," said the dwarf, after a little consideration, "then I think they'll come to you yet." "Do you think they will?" cried Kit eagerly. "Aye, I think they will," returned the dwarf. "Now when they do, let me know, do you hear? Let me know and I'll give you something. I want to do 'em a kindness, and I can't do 'em a kindness unless I know where they are. You hear what I say?" Kit might have returned some answer which would not have been agreeable to his irascible questioner, if the boy from the wharf, who had been skulking about the room in search of anything that might have been left about by accident, had not happened to cry, "Here's a bird, what's to be done with this?" "Wring its neck," rejoined Quilp. "Oh no, don't do that," said Kit, stepping forward. "Give it to me." "Oh yes, I dare say," cried the other boy. "Come, you let the cage alone and let me wring its neck, will you? He said I was to do it. You let the cage alone, will you?" "Give it here, give it to me, you dogs," roared Quilp. "Fight for it, you dogs, or I'll wring its neck myself." Without further persuasion, the two boys fell upon each other tooth and nail, while Quilp, holding up the cage in one hand and chopping the ground with his knife in an ecstasy, urged them on by his taunts and cries to fight more fiercely. They were a pretty equal match, and rolled about together, exchanging blows which were by no means child's play, until at length Kit, planting a well-directed hit in his adversary's chest, disengaged himself, sprung nimbly up, and snatching the cage from Quilp's hands, made off with his prize. He did not stop once until he got home, where his bleeding face occasioned great consternation and caused the elder child to howl dreadfully. "Goodness gracious, Kit, what is the matter? What have you been doing?" cried Mrs. Nubbles. "Never you mind, mother," answered her son, wiping his face on the jack towel behind the door. I'm not hurt. Don't you be afraid for me. I've been fighting for a bird and won him, that's all. Hold your noise, little Jacob. I've never seen such a naughty boy in all my days. You've been fighting for a bird? Exclaimed his mother. Fighting for a bird, Fighting for a bird, replied Kit, and here he is, Miss Nellie's bird, mother, that they was going to ring the neck of. I stopped that, though. Ha, ha, ha. They wouldn't wring his neck and me by. No. It wouldn't do, mother. It wouldn't do at all. Ha, ha, ha. Kit, laughing so heartily with his swollen and bruised face looking out of the towel, made little Jacob laugh, and then his mother laughed, and then the baby crowed and kicked with great glee, and then they all laughed in concert, partly because of Kit's triumph, and partly because they were very fond of each other. When this fit was over, Kit exhibited the bird to both children as a great and precious rarity. It was only a poor linnet, Linnet, and looking about the wall for an old nail, made a scaffolding of a chair and table and twisted it out with great exultation. Let me see, said the boy. I think I'll hang him in the window, 'cause it's more light and cheerful and he can see the sky there. If he looks up very much. He's such a one to sing, I can tell you. So the scaffolding was made again, and Kit, climbing up with the poker for a hammer, knocked in the nail and hung up the cage, to the immeasurable delight of the whole family. When it had been adjusted and straightened a great many times, and he had walked backwards into the fireplace in his admiration of it, the arrangement was pronounced to be perfect. And now, mother, said the boy, before I rest any more, I'll go out and see if I can find a horse to hold, and then I can buy some bird seed and a bit of something nice for you into the bargain. And that's all, chapter 13. Get a little Diet Pepsi. I've been on the tea and the coffee all day long. Mercy. I hate this hack. So aggravating. Chapter 14. As it was very easy for Kit to persuade himself that the old house was in his way being anywhere, he tried to look upon his passing it once more as a matter of imperative and disagreeable necessity, quite apart from any desire of his own to which he could not choose but yield. It's not uncommon for people who are much better fed and taught than Christopher Nubbles had ever been, to make duties of their inclinations in matters of more doubtful propriety, and to take great credit for his self-denial with which they gratify themselves. There was no need of any caution this time, and no need of being detained by having to play out a return match with Daniel Quilp's boy. The place was entirely deserted and looked as dusty and dingy as it had been so for months. A rusty padlock was fastened on the door, ends of discolored blinds and curtains flapped drearily against the half-open upper windows, and the crooked holes cut in the closed shutters below were black with the darkness of the inside. Some of the glass in the window he had so often watched had been broken in the rough hurry of the morning, and that room looked more deserted and dull than any. A group of idle urchins had taken possession of the doorsteps, Some were plying the knocker and listening with delighted dread to the hollow sounds as it spread through the dismantled house. Others were clustered about the keyhole, watching half in jest, half in earnest for the ghost, which an hour's gloom added to the mystery that hung about the late inhabitants. Had already raised. Standing all alone in the midst of the business and bustle of the street, the house looked a picture of cold desolation, and Kit, who remembered the cheerful fire that used to burn there on a winter's night, the no less cheerful laugh that made the small room ring, turned quite mournfully away. It must be especially observed, in justice to poor Kit, that he was by no means of a sentimental turn, and perhaps had never heard that adjective in all his life. He was only a soft-hearted, grateful fellow, and had nothing genteel or polite about him. Consequently, instead of going home instead of him going home again in his grief to kick the children and abuse his mother, and in parentheses, for when your finely stung people are out of sorts, they must have everybody else unhappy likewise. He returned his thoughts to the vulgar expedient of making them more comfortable if he could. Bless us, what a number of gentlemen on horseback there were riding up and down, and how few of them wanted their horses held. A good city speculator or parliamentary commissioner could have told to a fraction from the crowds that were canting about what sum of money was realized in London in the course of a year by holding horses alone, and undoubtedly it would have been a very large one if only a 20th part of the gentlemen without grooms had had occasion to alight, but they had not. And it is often an ill-natured maybe I'm getting fibers down my throat or something. I don't know. Now, where was I? Ill-natured circumstance like this which spoils the most ingenious estimate in the world. Kit walked about, now with quick steps and now with slow, now lingering as some rider slackened his horse's pace, and looked about him, and now darting at full speed up a by-street as he caught a glimpse of some distant horseman going lazily up the shadow side of the road, and promising to stop at every door. But on they went, one after another, and there was not a penny stirring. I wonder, thought the boy, if one of these gentlemen knew there was nothing in the cupboard at home, whether he'd stop on purpose and make believe that he wanted to call somewhere, that I might earn a trifle. He was quite tired out with pacing the streets, to say nothing of repeated disappointments, and was sitting down upon a step to rest when there approached towards him a little clattering, jingling four-wheeled chaise drawn by a little obstinate-looking, rough-coated pony. Oh, Lordy. Pony. and driven by a little fat, placid-faced old gentleman. Beside the little old gentleman sat a little old lady, plump and placid like himself, and the pony was coming along at his own pace and doing exactly as he pleased with the whole concern. If the old gentleman remonstrated by shaking the reins, the pony replied by shaking his head. It was plain that the utmost the pony would consent to do was to go in his own way up any street that the old gentleman particularly wished to traverse, but that it was an understanding between them that he must do this after his own fashion or not at all. And y'all, I hate it, but I'm going to just keep coughing and hacking and hacking and coughing. So, I'll try again tomorrow. Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. I feel fine. I'm just harking. So I'm going to get in here and take a pill. Love y'all. Did I say be sweet, don't be ugly? Probably. Night. See you tomorrow at 5. Bye-bye.